Oh shit. Okay, so we are now streaming on live onto Facebook. Welcome everyone to the Cosmic Ascension Waves of Light with myself, Soma Arah, and very special guest this evening, Stone Hobbit, who is a lifelong experiencer and survivor, pedophile, child trafficking, satanic ritual abuse, MK Ultra, post-traumatic stress disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, exist strategy, MILab super soldier program, genetic manipulation, monarch and targeted individual with ongoing extraterrestrial encounters, multi-dimensional beings, orbs, plasma spheres, regular craft sightings, shadow beings, cryptids, night terrors, walk-ins. And that's just to name a few things that this lady has experienced. She has, I don't want to say the word amazing, and I don't want to say the word story, but she's definitely had a life full of experiences outside of the norm. And I'd like to introduce you Stoney, or Stone Hobbit. I tend to call you Stoney, I'm sorry. But welcome.
Right. Thank you. It's awesome being here, Soma. Thank you. Yes, I just basically call it an adventure. It's you know, there's been so many different stages. You know, we called it a school at one stage, we called it a prison another time. You know, we can see that there's a paradise there. There's absolutely just an adventure, and we make it what we want to, you know, what we want to get from it. It comes down at the end of the time as levels of perception. You know, we break through the emotional perception levels and barriers. We break through the physical feeling states and the stuck states. We get to break all of this. You know, I work in deprogramming. I'm basically what I call a navigator. So we have a lot of different experiences emotionally, from grief and so on. And I break down where your baggage comes from. We can all do this ourselves, all right? There's no one master. Anybody who says they're a master of something knows nothing at all, because there's always something more. There's always another level to it.
Yeah.
So it's basically about recognizing the energies and frequencies and breaking yourself down, breaking your construct down, and reestablishing who you are within it. So, okay.
So
Good to be here. That's me.
thank you, Stone. So I heard some of what you had to share earlier. So please let me start with the question of what happened in your childhood. What was one of your earliest memories? Good or bad, just wherever you want to start, and maybe you could share some of your story with us. I'd like to do maybe 3 or 4 or more interviews with you. So let's do a series, because I find your information is you've really had a full on a lot of different experiences with different things, not just ETs, not just UFOs, but the whole shebang.
Yeah.
As I have, but I did have a lot of abuse as a child, but I never had as far as I know, my memories, I do have blocked memories, so I don't have all my memories back yet, hopefully, but I never had the satanic abuse. I did have abuse, and I did have pictures taken of me as a child, that as far as I know, my mum still doesn't know about, unless she did know. I don't think she did know. But yeah, I thought I had it bad until this last year, when I began hearing stories of people that have had satanic abuse and you know, those types of things, which is just, it makes me realize how lucky I was and how protected I really was, because it could have been a hell of a lot worse, a hell of a lot worse. So I had, you know, in comparison to some, I had it really bad. In comparison to others, like yourself, I had it easy. I had it easy. So let's start off with your first memories, and maybe if you could talk us through your childhood. Maybe if you could, maybe we could do that. Maybe we, you know, where we do a couple of different interviews where you talk us through your different ages.
All right. Okay.
Or we could do a, you know, if you could talk us from 0 to up to now, and then if you miss anything, we can cover that in a different interview.
All right. Okay. Right, so I'll go back to just before I was born. My mother was raised in a Catholic family, very religious. They were raised by their mum only. My grandfather had died from a spider bite here in New Zealand after he came back from being in the war. His wife was also a nurse in the Australian Army. Flying, she was one of the first flying nurses in the military, for the military. On the other side of the family, my grandfather was involved in politics. A place called Friendship House. He was a minister of Parliament, practicing, you know, Mason. As for my parents, I believe my mother was very susceptible to direction, being told what to do, you know, and just, you know, she fell into a bad connection with my father. He was a criminal at the time when they met and so on, but he had also been sexually abused by my grandfather. So the sexual abuse is, you know, hereditary. It comes down the line, you know, it's been generational, I should say, not hereditary. And so at one stage, the house was quarantined. This is while my mother was pregnant with me. the place was quarantined, and everybody was the government came in and started vaccinating them against tuberculosis. I had a younger sister. I had an older sister. She was born before me. And after I was born with an immunity to tuberculosis. And every year until I was about 14, 15, when I realized what was going on, I'd have to go in and have a blood test, and they were testing my blood. When I was born a month premature. I honestly believe the rough entry that I came into, my mother apparently died on the table and they had to resuscitate her, and lightning hit the hospital and all sorts of crazy stuff happened, but I still arrived. And they had to put me into an incubator. I was under 5 pounds born. After that, it's basically when they took me home, it was 27 days after I was born. And on the 29th day, my sister was pronounced brain dead from taking my father's medications. So, on one aspect of it, this all seems like this is an everyday thing. This is what happens. This is what a sad case. But as I got further on and I lost my own son, my first child, I started seeing patterns, and I went back further and further. And I found that through the generations of females on my mother's side, every one of the females lost their first child. It was, now I see it as there's another connection to this, but that'll come along during the process. So anyway, my sister was buried, and I was given away for the first time, within many, many times.
Okay, so let me just ask you. So how old were you then when your sister passed away?
I was born on the 1st of July, and she would have died on the 29th.
Okay.
So yeah,
Okay.
she just turned 1 on the 14th of July.
Okay.
Yeah. So from there, I was given away for nearly a year and a half, 2 years. And when my foster parents wanted to adopt me, my biological unit came back. And by that stage, my other sister was pretty much ready to be born. So there was another one in between. So I had another sister and another sister on the way. So that's when all the horror started. These are the memories that I started having, was being given away to people because they couldn't take care of me for one reason or another. I did a lot of visits to the doctor because I was a sickly child, and I had asthma, I had everything you could bloody imagine. Now, from then, my first real childhood memory is standing in nappies between 2 massive dogs, which always seemed to be there wherever I was throughout my journey. It's like these dogs have come back to me in spirit form on a couple of occasions. So it's like they guarded me from something. After that, the next childhood memory was this elderly lady came up to me. She, and I would later on encounter her several times throughout this journey. She took my hand and we went for a long walk. I must have been about three years, or maybe even 4 years old. I was still in nappies. I was little and stuff, and I remembered walking with her a long way, all the way into this little township, and all the way back, and nothing else in between. I just know I got there and I got back with this old lady who was carrying this, what they used to call a carpet bag. When I got back, I have to say now, through the different journeys, she's turned out to be sort of like a guardian. I haven't fully analyzed these experiences with her. I just see now there's a pattern. There's several encounters with elderly ladies, and I feel quite connected, and I feel like it's the same woman or the same energy each time. But as I get older, I see her in a different, a perception. But she's still the same feeling. A couple of times I have felt like she was another version of myself, making sure that I'm doing and I'm at the right place at the right time. With all the stuff that's gone on in my life, I have felt pretty protected. I felt like there's been something there. When I was younger, I was carried away by a greyhound dog up in a place called Riverhead, and I remember being found. But I have this total hate. I do not like greyhound dogs. I think they're horrible. And I always wonder, was that a connection to what I encountered then? I don't know if I was carried away or if I crawled away or whatever, but that's where I was located. The next time
Sorry, Stone, go on.
The next time was with that elderly lady. And when I got back, everybody was all crazy around me because apparently I'd gone missing. But I'd just gone for a walk.
So I wanted to ask you, so your mum died when you were born, and you
No, she didn't die. She didn't die. They resuscitated her.
Okay, but you were still adopted out?
No, I was basically given to family friends, and when my parents were over the grief of my sister who died, they would come back and take me back.
Okay.
But these foster family wanted to adopt me because in the meantime, my biological mother and father had another daughter and another on the way.
Okay. So, and how long did that go on for? How long were you with your mum and then not?
All through my life. All through my life. There were times when, as I got older, because I'm a child, I'm an infant. I was an infant when I was first sexually abused by and in the care of my father for money through an organisation called Centrepoint with Bert Potter. If you are familiar with New Zealand pedophile rings, I was one of the surviving children. Now, one thing I've found over the years was with this particular Centrepoint, they closed down what they called the main hub and stuff and put the main leaders and stuff inside. But what I've never heard too much about was there were certain other persons being groomed.
When you say inside, do you mean prison?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
That's all right. When they I fell off track there for a minute. Okay, so once the when these people were being groomed to take on the role of being leaders within pedophile rings, like if you can imagine the big pedophile ring and then there's little pedophile rings off that, they would bring their children to it was like little groups of meetings, and they'd get together, they'd do little satanic rituals in forestries or wherever in their homes and this sort of thing. They'd have get-togethers. My family were connected in the part where they would do these satanical rituals within the forestries that they were part of, and then go to the church groups that we would go to. There was always some people within one group that knew people within other groups. So basically, wherever I went within my childhood to my teens, there was always watchers. There was always people to report back. I was brought and sold on numerous occasions. This is the first time I'm coming out with the dark side of this, because it's real. It happened, and nobody out there with any kinds of bloody, fakery authority or learning can actually tell me or take away or change or even help me with the experiences that I went through. You know, I'm of sound mind and body here, and this stuff really does happen. If you don't look after those closest to you, you know, you have to take on the role of being trusted fully. And that means not going places that are going to disrupt somebody else's growth, violate their free will. We have to learn what free will is so it's not violated. And this is what happened. Everybody that was in my circles of caring for me as a child weren't actually doing that role. None of them. So it was like, you know,
None of them. There was no one? Okay.
there was teachers involved, there were aunties involved, there were uncles involved, there was bus drivers that drove us kids to school and back again when we lived in rural places. You know, there was always somebody out there. If my parents weren't home and us kids were left alone, there was always somebody else from one of these pedophile small groups that would be watching over us. All right, there was never any escape. And it got to the stage where the sons of the children from these adult pedophiles would then take advantage of the situation, of the information that they knew. You know, people don't realize that it doesn't just stop at one generation. It will, they're breeding themselves over and over again to keep committing these crimes against us. You know, I can say literally I've been raped at least a dozen times by children from these pedophiles because they were aware of what my father was doing, what their parents were doing, and this was their way of getting their bit as well. You know, so there's heaps. I'm sorry, what was the question?
That's okay. You're doing great. I think with everything that you've experienced, I think you are amazing. I think you have overcome stuff that would destroy a lot of people mentally and emotionally. And you know, you see them. I see them when I go out to the supermarket, because I'm not really allowed out anywhere else these days. You know, you see them. You know, they often become homeless people.
Yeah.
I don't like to use the word broken, but that, you know, they have had experiences that they haven't managed to heal from yet.
That's because the people that say that they're there to help, you know, come and go and see a psychiatrist, they'll help you mentally. No. That wasn't my experience. You know, time and time again, they would go, I went there and they were collecting the data. They were collecting the data so they knew exactly who these pedophiles were, where they were connected to, and all of this. There was no tools ever given to me how to repair the damages that were done. There were times when I was violated, you know, mentally by, you know, I had psychiatrists fall asleep. I had psychiatrists invite me to a lesbian ball. I had, you know, there's been all these different areas of manipulation through the psychologists, the so-called specialists. I was involved in what we have here in New Zealand is called ACC, all right, Accident Compensation Corporation. And I spent pretty much over 15 years realizing I was trying to convince them that what I experienced was real and that they had all of these side effects. And where do I turn to for help? And then I realized that none of these people had anything up here. They just, you know, they got books but I had to go and I had to sit, you know, course after course in psychology just to catch up. That's what it felt like. I had to catch up to what it was that people were saying about me, the terminologies they were using, because when I grew up in the normality that, you know, sex is what you have, it doesn't matter what age you are. And if you get pushed over to him and he's a bit rough, you know, you're not allowed to talk about it. You're not allowed to go to school. You're not allowed to talk to anybody. Well, you got to go to school, but you're not allowed to talk to anybody at school. I'll tell you right now, I talked as much as I bloody could, and it didn't do me any good because it always got back and I always got a hiding for it. You know, there's ways of being belted without actually having marks all over. I got beaten to a point one day where I couldn't sit down. I had whip marks all over my back. I couldn't sit down. You know, I've been locked underneath the house because I didn't do as I was told. You know, there were times when my father pretended to be giving me a belting for doing something. Meanwhile, he's actually raping me. And I can't say and call out and do anything. You know, there's all these different areas where...
How old were you, Stone, when this happened? And was it just you, or was there other siblings around?
No, no, it was me for a long time, and throughout the journey, at one stage of the journey, there was a lot happening, and I got sent back to New Zealand. We lived here. I was born here in New Zealand. We were here until about 1979, when there was a lot of stuff happening with Centrepoint. Okay, that was the pedophile ring in Albany. So we basically, us and a few other families, got sent over to Western Australia. And from there, it was jumping around different places until we went up into a place called Muliala, which was a mining town run by Endeavour Resources, about 20-30 minutes out of Marble Bar. So right up there at the top in the desert. So in one encounter, when I got sent back to New Zealand, my father turned around and started interfering with my next sister down. I have no contact by choice with any of my siblings or their families. This is what it came down to from my father's actions. The fact that none of my aunties or uncles, you know, his brothers and sisters, none of them, they all knew, because several of them had encountered sexual abuse themselves at the hands of my grandfather, all right? And none of them ever stood up and protected any of the kids at all. So, like, I've got cousins who've gone through similar shit as I have, oh, excuse me, the similar stuff that I'd gone through.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, there's all these different connections to it. So, sorry, you asked me something and I jumped off.
That's okay, darling. So how old were you when the abuse started with your father, and how old were you when you were raped? And did it get worse as you got older? And how old were you when you left? And where did you go? How did you get away?
Okay. I remember it would happen on a couple of days a week during, you know, when I was between 7 and 8 years old. That was like a lot was happening within that year of me being sexually abused. I was sexually abused before then. I remember a place in Pomaria, and I had crashed into a concrete lamppost and gone blind, and I recall my father and an uncle interfering that was staying at the house. And before that, it was my grandfather, who was a politician, and I can remember to this day being in nappies and then being in fully underpants, and sitting on their knees, and that's when nasty stuff they would do with their fingers and all sorts. So I can go back a long time of being interfered with by family members, and there was always somebody in between, because everybody was known as auntie and uncle. It didn't matter whether they were blood related or not, they were known as auntie or uncle. There was no names, okay? Sometimes there was Mr. or Mrs. and that sort of thing, but there was never no names. And that was one of the programs that I would later understand what they were doing and how it worked on me, you know. So then I would say we moved to Australia. I mean, all of the stuff was happening here in New Zealand. We moved to Australia in 79, and the first encounter over there was my sisters were going to school. My father had injured himself and he had to be at home, and for some reason he pulled me off the bus. My mum had already gone to work, the kids they were on the bus going to school. He'd pulled me off the bus, and that's when it started there. And from there we went into the Masonic lodge. I was introduced, I became a debutante. did all of the married to the Masonic order and stuff, and the rituals changed. There was more psychological play going on. There's a lot of pushing and shoving. That was one thing I always noticed, was the pushing and shoving, and the, you know, you're just a piece of meat, I'll do whatever I want with you, you know. And then from there, it was, with all of these encounters, there's the spiritual side that's going on. There's the aliens, or whatever they were, the ghosts that would show up. There were beings there with me. I had been suffocated in one occasion in one of the forest trees by the neighbor. He held me by the throat and was raping me, and the next minute it was black. I had entered in his back door of the house, and I just basically remember waking up, running down the street on the front side of the house to get back to my house. So I just remember the
How
weight.
old were you when that happened?
I was 8 years old then, on that occasion, and that was New Zealand. In Australia was 9. And then the massive part came when I got to my, you know, early teens. I had my period at 9, 10 years old. I had started developing breasts at an early age. They then put me on the pill at 10 because I was having regular sexual encounters with strangers and my father and so on. It was pretty heavy duty. I didn't know I was going to go this deep into it. So I apologize if I trigger anybody. That's not my intention. And, you know, I'm never far if you need to have a chat about this stuff, because we can get through it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll make sure that I give out all your details at the end and post them to the YouTube page. Where was your mum when all the abuse with your father was happening? Was your mum aware of it?
Yes.
And,
You know, I used to think that she wasn't, but as I got older, I was able to see the patterns. Right, there would be a bath that would be laid, or a nice shower, and there'd be perfumed up and decorated. I have to call it decorated because that's what it felt like. Dressed, you know. Then I'd be sat down, and I would be given a biscuit and a drink, and then about half an hour later, I'd never felt any pain after that. I realized later on that my mother had been drugging me. She had been feeding me marijuana. Okay. I don't know what else. I know the symptoms, the feeling state when you get that high on now as an adult. I can relate it to the feeling state that I experienced as a child. So, and then, you know, there was the time when my father was growing it and selling it at the same time as being a pedophile. So there's all these little connections that was taking place at the same time. Yes, I have to say that my mother was aware of it, because of the grooming stages, because in some encounters of the rituals where I was given over to other people to enjoy. They could enjoy me whatever way they wanted. And my parents would be standing on the other side, dressed up, participating in just watching and knowing that they're going to get some money at the end of this. You know, that's what I was.
Stone, I have to ask you a question.
Yeah.
And before I ask, I need to explain. So years ago, I can't even remember what year it was. It was between now and 2009, somewhere along the way. I had this was after I started to channel the Pleiadians. I was given a download of information. I was taken into an altered mind state, and I was shown that my family, with all my abuse and everything, that my family were that I didn't come from here, that I came from the outside in, I call it. So I would be Pleiadian, but this is the characteristic of a starseed, where you come from the outside in, you come from somewhere else to Earth. And I was shown that, and this is very common, and but it explains the question as well. But I was shown that I don't come from here, that I come from the Pleiades or wherever, you know, other starseeds come from. I come from the Pleiades predominantly. And I was shown that I was born into this family, and the abuse I experienced and everything, but I was shown that I was like a light born into this family of dark, negative, dysfunctional trauma, and just evil on whatever level, whatever extremity you want to, you know, that there are many different levels, but my family, I didn't have the satanic stuff that I can remember. I didn't have it that I can remember. And if it's there, hopefully it will come to light one day. But I was shown that I was born into this family that does contain or is ruled at times, either consciously or unconsciously, by negative ET energy. So have you seen the same thing with your family?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Will you
Absolutely.
talk to that a little bit, because I really want the audience to understand this, that
Okay.
I'm not alone, I'm not special, I'm not, you know, I'm just like any other starseed.
Yeah, there's always been a very dark force within the family. And the first time I really noticed it was I'd come home from school and I had recognized some faces. My grandfather was having a meeting, and it just basically got to the point where their skin wasn't their skin anymore. They weren't who they portrayed themselves to be anymore. The more that I watched and interacted with these uncles and aunties, in, you know, as a young child, 4 or 5, I'm seeing these people drinking and taking drugs, and, you know, it's not just me. I'm not the only kid running around the table at this age. You know, we're seeing this happen. An uncle took me aside into a room, and, you know, my younger sister had seen it, and it wasn't my uncle. It was an animal. There was an animal there. And, you know, towards the end there, I lost the plot because I didn't know what this animal was. It was scary. It was suffocating me to death. Whew, excuse me. And after, you know, I had seen a lot of other entities by that stage, but to me, they weren't ghosts and aliens and entities and paranormals, because they were always there. They were always popping in and out, you know. And I'd heard a lot of times people talking about imaginary friends. Now, I've had night terrors all my life. People put the night terrors down to being from the traumatic experiences I had as a kid. Now, I can tell you from my memory and these experiences that, yes, I've had some traumatic experiences and encounters inside these states that I've been in, but I never was raped or sexually abused in any of that state. In any of the night terrors, they never used that fear factor to keep me in that paralytic state, that stuck state. But while I'm in there, I'm seeing these different dimensional creatures. And I've seen these creatures come out of their dimension into our dimension. I've seen these creatures as what I labeled as I got older, I started really opening up and looking at this journey when I was in my 30s. And so, you know, I'd have an encounter, like I got to see what a parasitical entity was and how they feed off other people, how they create chaotic states of mind, how they are able to latch on to the other family members. And before you know it, the whole family is infected by this parasitical being. And there is this silent feeding that goes on. There's always arguments. There's always something going on. They cannot find that balance of, you know, to balance down their stress levels. I went to a church meeting, biggest parasitical, because I don't do churches. Okay, I've seen too much satanic worship from people within these organizations telling us that they're there to help us, but nothing's for free, people. if you go to Salvation Army, nothing is for free. You know, people start out with good intentions out there, but then they get, because of the situation they're in, their good energy and stuff, and they go into this area where there's parasitical feeders, and I'm saying bucket parasites. Bucket parasites are those that are feeding off the elderly, all right, go to church, make them tired. That's because that's all they're allowed now. So that's what they do. And I've seen these entities overshadow the beings that interfered with me, you know, that turned around and raped me at different stages. They've come out of it. And then I've seen, okay, they're feeding something from me. Now, if I stay calm and I don't fight back and I do as I'm told, it's over. I don't, you know, I can, it's just something that happens all the time. But then once you're aware that there are all these different levels to it, I now can put faces to these different beings and say, hey, no more. You took without asking. You took without allowing me the knowledge of knowing what the contract or what the deal was. I don't believe in this contract stuff. You know, this is once you become awake and aware, it's not just about the entities and demonic entities and the good entities that are coming in. It's about you knowing how you work and what level of dimension these parasites are coming in from to feed from us, and how we can protect ourselves against this happening. And one of the things is by being honest to yourself, looking out there and making sure that you're not breaking the right of somebody else's free will. You know, I found it very hard to become a parent because of being sexually abused. I didn't want to, when I discovered that what was happening was wrong, there was no way I was ever going to cross those lines. I don't want that to ever happen to anybody, what I went through. That's just wrong, you know? And so somehow I made it out of that dark area. I could have easily have slipped into doing and being as they were, but it didn't sit right. There was just something that wasn't right about it for me at that stage. Then I started getting into the black magic and stuff because that's what I was surrounded in. And I saw how easy it was to play with that, to make things happen and stuff. But I also saw the consequences to that. And I wasn't going to play that game, and I'm not going to pay for those crimes because I can see it. I don't need to be part of that. You know, and if I see somebody else who's stepping into that, I know there's only so much I can do and say, but they will have to find it out for themselves. And you know, I always hope that it's not the hard way, but it happens. And
Okay.
it's like,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of different creatures through it. You know, sometimes I felt like some of these creatures were guiding my parent hosts, like my father being the biological host was being fed off parasitically because he had gone through it. So they could pull him like a puppet to whatever direction. And there was always that little bit of greed. He was always promised a little bit more for a little bit more. And, you know, and it's just how it was.
So what these parasites, the parasitic energy, what do they, did you see them physically or did you see them in your mind's
Yes.
eye?
No,
And
no,
what do they
they
look
were
like?
physical. It got to a stage where I could see these things physically. I could say, okay, well, it's not in my imagination. I am actually really seeing it.
And what do they look like?
Okay, well, this particular type that I'm talking about is bottom feeders. Pretty tall, pretty tall. I do have a photo of me surrounded by orbs. I will have to give it out to you for another show. But there's like a bullet hole in my head and wrapped around my neck and over the top of me, you can see that one of these creatures leaning over top of me with its tail, and it looks like a lizard. I call them skitterers. Now they're watchers and stuff. And when they come around, I see them running around. I know that these parasitical entities are there. Now, this one that I'm going to particularly talk about, this little Asian guy came in, and I was at a sauna, you know, public sauna. And I'm in there having a sauna. Oh God, I was in my early 30s.
Okay.
This stuff that's happens to me is reoccurring.
Yeah.
That's why I'm on an adventure, because I've allowed myself to recognize the energies when they're coming in. It's about using our senses, because we're a receiver and we're a sender of different frequencies. We all have our own individual frequency signature, all right? Once you're aware of that, you go, okay, well, nobody's zooming in and getting my thoughts anymore. You can switch it off or you switch it on.
So how
So
old are you now?
Oh, I'm not going to give you that information. Yeah, anyway. When I was in the sauna and this little Asian came in, I could see just by when he came in and he was hunched over and he was he just really needed to be straightened out, and he sat down and it wasn't until somebody put some water or something on the rocks and it made a big steam. And I'm a strong follower I make smudge sticks and I do clearings and stuff, because when I use the smoke, I see these entities, they appear. Right? And the same thing happened when the steam hit, and it was right near him. I could see the silhouette of this being. And when I looked above the guy's head, I saw this being looking back at me, and it was surprised that I could see it. That's when I realized I was actually looking straight in the face of a being who was a parasitical entity that was feeding off a human host. And it got uncomfortable. The guy started moving around, and when it was like he was being literally controlled. Now, this creature must have been, if he had stood up properly, because he was hunched over this little short being, so he looked smaller, he would have touched the doorway, the top of the doorway. Now, I'm only 5'5", so I think most doorways are about 6 foot or something. That this being would have easily, the back, as he was bending over, this little Asian guy, the back of him would have easily just, the backbone would have touched the doorway. So yes, quite tall creature. When the creature realized I could see him, the human host got uncomfortable and moved all around, and he looked up at me. The guy looked up straight at me. So there was still that connection of the human knew something wasn't right. And when he looked up and he looked at me, I knew that the parasitical being had seen the same thing. And that's when the tug of war started to happen. And I just kept talking in my mind, saying to this being, I can see you. I can see you. What do you think you're doing? And this is just who I am. Anyway, it got uncomfortable and the human left the facility. He went out of the sauna, went over to the shower, and I thought, I'm going to stay here. I couldn't believe what I had seen. I started looking at every other person that was in there just to see if I could see anything around them, And I was like, put my arms out, see if I could see anything. I was like, whoa. Anyway, a few minutes went by and this chap came back in and he sat down, and I could see that the parasitical entity had become quite aggressive to the human host, and the human host was doing all sorts of weird things, like being possessed, is twitching and doing weird turkey sort of moves and stuff, and he looked straight up at me. And he said thank you, and then he walked out, and that was it. When I came out of the sauna and I'm standing by where the shower is, I'm looking straight out the car park. This little Asian guy is walking tall, and I'm not seeing anything around him. It was like just the acknowledgement that it wasn't all just there in his head, that he knew something else had attached itself to him. Yeah. And it was only a matter of minutes between him leaving the room, getting changed, leaving the facility, and walking tall. I don't know if I had anything to do with it physically, because he did the work, but I didn't need a parasite on him after that.
And I just want to jump in there, Stoney, and ask, because I think often when we have these experiences, I think just the pure ability to see the energy,
Yeah.
it does dissipate, I think sometimes. So also when you were talking, what I was getting is that, have you done any kind of shamanic work? Because I think with what I'm getting at now is that you have been a shaman in a past life and you've brought that energy forward. A lot of us are born shamans where we see these types of energies. I've seen similar energy. I'm not going to go into that now, but I've seen similar energy with certain people. And sometimes it does dissipate when you face it, when you look at it, when you see it, when you tell it that you see it and it knows you see it and you acknowledge it. It kind of, it releases it from its karma, or I guess it's a karmic kind of thing. When you recognize something, it's like when you recognize you have certain negative traits or emotions, you're able to look at them and they kind of dissipate. The same with past lives. When you recognize a past life or an energy or something that is a problem, it will dissipate. So going back to the shamanic stuff, I was seeing when you were talking that you've had a past life where you've been a shaman, and that shamanic energy really, I really felt that shamanic energy come through with you, where you've had the past life as a shaman, and you've brought that forward, and very powerful energy you've got. So do you do shamanic work now? Have you got into that at all? Or?
Okay, I started when I was doing my deprogramming. Yes, I grew up being called weird. I had visions all my life. I've had visions of past lives. I proved to myself and those around me at one particular time that I did live here once before. I was able to identify a location, went there. Sure enough, there was materials there that I can recall putting there. So I proved to myself in reincarnation. When I got really sick as a child, I'd gone to a location and I had gotten pneumonia as a child. And in this lifetime, I had suffered from pneumonia, acute pneumonia, and all of this. And they were connected. There's so many different illnesses to it. And through some of these stages where I've either been concussed or not quite in this reality, but also attached to the other dimensions, I've been able to, it's like I'm going through a tunnel and I can see these different rooms, and the things I'm looking in is me. It's different stages of my experiences. So one of them was, I looked around me, I started doing regressions for myself. I wanted to know, like, I went to a hypnotist when I was younger and they had a very traumatic experience. I only went there for I thought I had an eating disorder and stuff back then. Just all the different deprogramming I was doing back then. And he said to me, I don't recall much of it. I just said, just record it, do what you got to do. And he must have put me under in such a state, because he turned around, gave us the recording. I don't know whatever happened to it. I never got to listen to it. It just somehow miraculously disappeared. But I was asked, please don't ever come back. Please don't ever be regressed or be hypnotized ever again. So it's sort of, that little bit of stigma is always sort of stuck there. So I thought, okay, well, whatever it was, and as I've gotten older, I realized there was a lot of stuff there that at the time of that visit, I wasn't even aware of. I was still under Stockholm syndrome. I was still breaking those barriers down of the programs. So I had no idea at the time. But now I can, when one of the visions I went back to, yes, I played a role of a shamanic African woman in a cave. And I proved that to myself on a couple of encounters where people have come around from Africa, and I see stuff around them. This one particular person came in and there was these things flying around him. It was like, I was scared. Not much scares me anymore, you know, in the spiritual realms. But these felt like they could suck my energy. They could attach to me. It was like, no, back off. Go get out of my face. I don't want you near me, you know. But I was still learning, and because I'd always had these visions and stuff, and I tried switching them off, and I would see people get run over or accidents, and I would always end up being there when it happened, you know. So I've seen myself as an African female chewing leather with kids and being a slave, you know, being sold to someone and whipped till I died because I wouldn't conform. And it just seems to be the pattern. I don't conform to anything. I do know that there's different stages, like being called a witch, being called a shaman, going through the Wiccan phase, looking at practicing black magic, you know, being a hybrid, having all these different dimensional experiences. I now realize it's like we're healers, or, you know, I have to look at myself as a healer. I know plants. I have information about plants and medicines. I can walk into anybody's garden and say, well, what ails you right now? Because there's a plant here that's saying you should be consuming it. This is how you can mix it up, you know, for you, because each person is different. There is no one cure for anybody out there. The plants will tell us what we need at the time. So yes, I have to say, long story short, yep.
Yep.
I've had, definitely shamanic journey.
Yeah.
So,
And the other thing I want to add to that as well is the when you suck a seed before you plant it, it will grow for what you need. So
that's right.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to say, we were talking earlier, and I think it was earlier when you were mentioning about the Aborigine man and who took your hand and you went off. Can you just run that through? Can you go through that again, just for the audience? And I've got a couple of questions for you about that.
Okay. Where I lived, they had to, it was like, because it was a mining industry, there was an area just for the men's quarters, then there was family quarters, and then over the big hill from there, big, you know, stone hill, there was this like gully, and in there was a creek that went through, and it went to an old part of the mine. The place was called Moliella in Western Australia. And nobody was allowed in there because apparently, because of the way the rocks were and the land was, it was a breeding ground for different types of snakes. Now, the night previous, a young chap who was also a victim of the same pedophile ring that I was involved in, we were getting to an age where we understood what was going on and we didn't want to be violated anymore. So we would spend hours together. This one, I would sleep with a knife underneath my pillow, and he started doing the same thing. And we had made a vow that the next time that we were going to be violated, we were going to stab the person.
How old were you?
I would have been about 12, 13.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, he was over at my place. We were on the bed. We were just, you know, talking about stuff. And then my father walked in and caught him in there. He, of course, lashed out and stuff, jumped out the window, took off. He ended up being found in a location. His dog gave him away. Cops came, took him away. Never saw him again. Never heard anything. Just heard that he was going to a boys' home somewhere in Port Hedland. Never saw him again. But I know...
Did you know his name?
Yes.
Have you ever tried to find him?
Oh, many times, mate. Many times. I've looked people up. I've looked other kids up who've said they don't want to go there. They've got families they want to protect and care for. You know, they don't want to talk about this stuff. Good catching up. That's it. Let's move on again. that's fine and dandy. I respect that. It's not an easy journey for anybody. Anyway, when I got told that he'd got caught, and then I got told what my punishment was going to be, I did a runner. All right, I couldn't be there anymore because I didn't think I was going to live through what was meant to happen. So I ran through this location, and because nobody came after me through it, I remember hearing hissing at my feet. I was running along. There was this dugout river that ran between it, that was dug out by the mining company. I jumped that. I didn't know who I was. I had to get out of there. It was my life or theirs. And when I got to the other side, there was this figure standing there, and he was on his walkabout, is what they call their walkabout, a journey of age that they go on. And I got to the other side, and I kept running, and I hid in some rocks and stuff. Nobody knew where I was. And, it was getting cold, and this guy was standing there, this dark Aboriginal, all painted up, standing there. And he spoke English, and he said, "Oh, come with me, I'll take you." And I saw what happened, and da-da-da. So we went off, got into the back of a ute. I didn't care at that stage. Nothing could be any worse than what I'd already lived through, so I didn't care about my own safety. And we went off, and we went into the desert, and it was absolutely an education. They taught me so much about the spiritual side of things, and I started to see that I accepted the fact that I could see things around me. I wasn't alone. I wasn't crazy. And I got to learn how to cook different foods and make different foods, and realized I have this native information within me. This comes back to being the shamanic healer, the journey of healing. And I believe that we're all got it in us. It's just a matter of being able to turn on that information. As soon as we start accepting who we are, acknowledging that there's a lot more to us, and we could become anything we choose to, as long as we don't limit ourselves to other people's limitations. Stop getting stuck in stuck states. It's absolutely amazing. So
it
yes,
really is. What you're saying is so important, Stone. So important. So many of us. I mean, if you look at the world today, it's a prime example of being stuck in a mind fuck.
Oh, totally, 100%.
Total mind fuck. And
we're just a commodity to them. Once you realize that we are the resource that they are mining, you close the gates. You stop allow that from happening. You start knowing what you want to happen, what you want to find out there. And when we're all, the 100 monkey syndrome, once we're all doing the same thing, there's nothing that they can create on this planet, alien-wise or otherwise, to stop us. Because we've been so genetically manipulated to be here at this time.
But go back to the Aboriginal man. So he held your hand and he took you, and he took you for a couple of weeks. Into a loving, safe environment. Is that right? Did he know? Did the family where you were, where he took you, did they know what was going on? Did you get a sense that they knew?
I don't know if they knew what was going on. I just know that he guided me in there. He said a few things to them, and then I was offered clothing, and I was offered somewhere to sleep, and and I remember drinking something and then just getting up in the morning. Once I got up in the morning, it was a whole different new reality. It was like these people were teaching me and feeding me and guiding me, and I wanted to be part of it. I didn't want what I had before. I didn't want to be part of what they called and deemed a family, because that family was harming me. But this other family, this Aboriginal unit, no, they weren't harming me. They were like how I would like to live. So, and I never forget it. I'll never forget that journey. It was like, with every negative journey now where I'm at, I can see a little bit of positive in it. And I've had to do a hell of a lot of work. That does not excuse what I encountered by all of those, the different, assailants. That does not excuse them. When people talk about forgiveness. I've got nothing to forgive. I did nothing wrong. Okay, I learned to love and accept myself. So as soon as I am aware that what my free will is, how to take care of me, how not to abuse another's free will, because it's important that I treat those around me how I wish to be treated in return. So I'm not going to get that unless I become lead by example, you know. Every day is a good day because you're in it. You are in it, and I thank you for being in it. Okay? It's a change of perception straight away. We are so much more. And I got this from this family. You know, they showed me life under the stars. They showed me life in the desert is not barren. It's beautiful once you start to acknowledge what's right in front of you.
And so years ago, I can't remember what year it was. I think it was maybe 2010. I got to a point in my life where I'd forgiven myself, and I was living in Ireland at the time. I'd forgiven myself for all the abuse and everything. No, sorry, I'd forgiven the abusers. I'd forgiven the abusers years ago, but in 2009, 2011, I got to the point I felt very stuck. I felt very stuck, and I didn't know what it was, but I knew there was something else just under the surface that needed healing. And I realized one day that I needed to forgive myself. I'd already forgiven them. That was easier to do. For me, it was easier to forgive them than it was for me to forgive myself. So I had to forgive myself as well. And that kind of propelled me forward, I guess, propelled me forward. So that was another layer that I needed to heal, to look at and heal, because my family always shoved everything under the carpet, which I think is a very Irish thing to do, or a very common thing to do in the families of abusive families. Everything gets chucked under the carpet. And so how do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as a hybrid, as a starseed, as a shaman, as a abuse survivor, or like what labels do you give yourself as a healer?
Okay.
Not just as a healer, but as a I don't want to use the word human being, because you are far more than a human being, but in your body, how do you, I mean, do you know where you come from? Do you know the star nations? Like
as it goes, I'll just finish off the forgiveness part. I've got no reason to forgive any of these perpetrators. All right. I forgive myself for well, it's not allowing it to happen, but it was not acknowledging it soon enough. If I believe that if I forgive them, I'm going to easily forget and repeat, and I'm not going to allow that to happen. So I have to keep reminding myself. Now, you might want to call it self-torture or psychological torture and stuff, but I'm just staying conscious and aware. And when I do bump into these persons, animals, if you want to call them, they know I know. And that's the main thing. And if they're ever in my fray, they won't last long because my energy is very different, and I won't let anybody around them not be aware of what they did, of the crimes that they committed, because if I did that, I'm allowing all this shit to have happened. But I can't do that. I don't want that to happen to anybody else out there. It doesn't matter if it happens once or it happens 1,000 times. I don't want that. They don't need that to happen. You know, if we are a herd, if we like a herd mentality or a hive mentality, 100th monkey syndrome, if somebody over here experiences something, doesn't matter how dark it is, whatever it is, somebody else over there is going to get a ripple effect. They might not know where it came from. And this is where I see a lot of transferable anger coming up because they're not knowing where the stuff's coming from, because they don't teach us about how to read our frequencies, how to read the frequencies around us from animals and stuff, so we can become more empathic. It's happening anyway, whether they want it to or not. There's going to be a group that aren't and a group that are. Yes, as it comes to labels, I'm a bitzer, okay? I'm a bitzer bloody everything. I'm not too worried about where I came from because I'm the result. I'm here, okay? And I will keep testing all the different abilities and the senses that show themselves. I'm 100%, I research everything, okay? I will have a vision or a feeling state or some information will come in. I hear voices, I have voice to skull. What I've learned over the years, how to break these different areas down and know where they're coming from, and either accept the information or send it back to the sender, all right? Because I don't need to. I could see myself one day, you know, as a light being. I had an encounter with a couple of light beings that came through and separated and morphed back into one and showed me, you know, I eventually ran out of the room screaming like a sissy because I didn't know what the hell I was seeing. But they were showing me, they were familiar to me. They used a familiar person's face that I was comfortable with, but as soon as they portrayed that on themselves, I freaked out. Because I thought the worst. I thought I was seeing the spirit of somebody I cared for at the time. But in actual fact, where I'm at the moment of my understanding is they were showing me something familiar I was comfortable with. Then came the communication stage next to that. They'd already showed themselves to morph into two beings and then back into one. They came right up and leaned over the top of me, and there was no fear state of this experience I was happening.
And how old were you?
Well, this was when I was in my 30s.
Okay.
I think this was, I've got a date written down somewhere, so it's 2012 or 2014 or something like that. So yes, I've got all of my stuff is all detailed and stuff, and I've got pictures of some of the beings I've encountered, all sorts.
So
Fantastic.
Who were these two light beings? Were they?
I don't know who they were.
Okay.
I don't know who they were. I'm just sitting in bed, I've got the light on, I'm waiting for a friend to return home who's gone for a walk. And next minute they come through the roof. I'm on the left-hand side of the bed. The door's on the right-hand side. They come down on the right-hand side and they move down to the corner of the right-hand side of the bed, morphed into two, you know, separated. It was like an undulating, almost like plasma fireball thing, but it wasn't fire. There was no heat. There was none of that fear factor, I'm going to get burnt, you know. And then they morphed into two different beings. One was slightly taller and one was smaller. And I perceived that at that time as a male-female energies coming forth. And then they merged back into one and moved along the foot of the bed, up the side on the left-hand side, and then it leaned over. It was like a big man by that stage, leaning over top of me, right, you know, quite close, about this far apart. And I didn't feel any breath or anything. I just, the skin started to appear and it started to take on like a facial shape, you know, structure and stuff. And when then it got to the eyebrows, that's when I freaked out, because the rest of the face, bam, I recognized it as my friend who'd gone for a walk. And the first thing I thought was, oh no, they've been, you know, this is their spirit. Oh no, I've got to go find his body, you know, this sort of thing. It crept in and I freaked out. And a housemate that was there, a boarder that was staying with us, jumped out because of the scream that I'd made, came running out to see what was going on. He said he never saw anything in there. He didn't feel anything out, you know, untoward or anything out of the norm. But it was the scream that I'd let out. He said it was nothing like he'd ever heard before. It was blood curdling. Anyway, by the time we got to the lounge to the front door, because I'm heading for the front door, I'm going out to look for my friend. He was there. The door opened and he appeared. He was right there. So it was very, very bizarre. I went into a full panic mode breakdown because whoa, what did I just experience, you know?
Yeah.
But that's lingered for all this time. I don't know fully who they were or who they are. I feel very safe and comfortable, and like I'm always being watched by them and other beings. So, and I expect them to return anytime. So, you know.
And so are so the friends around you at the time when you had this experience, were they at the time awake and aware and conscious? On a similar
I would say my boarder was waking up to it all, right? He'd had a few experiences in his lifetime and he was pretty much waking up. I mean, anybody that hangs around me for too long, well, I'm sorry about that. It just happens, okay? And the other one, yes, definitely awake. You know, we shared a long journey, and yeah, the other one was definitely awake and aware and had seen his own stuff by that stage. So yes.
Well, I could just talk to you for hours and hours. Is there anything else you'd like to share? I mean, I know that we're going to do several of these anyway, so
oh, there's just so much. There's just so many areas, and basically just acknowledge yourself, acknowledge the journey that you've done so far. You know, once you become aware of who you are, you know what you can be held accountable for. So you make sure that each day you live just a little bit better. You make it just that little bit better for somebody else around you. You know, take the time to say hello. Giving a smile to somebody is contagious. It changes their endorphins in their body. It makes their brain think differently. You know, the things that we could do to pick this planet up a few frequencies, it doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't cost you anything at all. So there's so many areas, and I never stay on track. But I can pretty much be reached at any time. I do regressions. It's basically, my regression is look around you, look what you're attracted to. You know, has it got a year that it's attached to? Is it a Renaissance? Is it Tudor? What are you attracted to? Is it earthbound? Is, you know, there's so many different levels to the work that we're doing here right now. It's not just one dimension. From the experiences that I've come through, there's a lot of little wars going on. I call them silent warfare, because it's like we're portals, and these beings that can't access these dimensions can only access them via us, and we are waking up to it. You know, the conduit is almost closed for them. So anyway, that's me. I'm always happy to come and chat anytime.
Thanks, Stoney. So
there's nothing too dark.
Okay. Yeah, I'm the same. There's nothing I won't talk about. As you know, I often have to, when I have experiences, I often find that I need time to process them and integrate them. But really, there's, you know, once I've done that, there's nothing I won't talk about.
Yeah.
You know, sex and warts and all of it. Because I think it's really important. You know, we're here to, as truthers, we're here as starseeds, we're here to expose the horrendous atrocities that are still going on Earth, and they need to be exposed to so that we can. It's a birthing process. It's a cleanup time to get rid of all the shit and the scum bubbling at the surface of the pot to create a new Earth, a new world. A couple of questions that came up just now for me were: do you consider yourself a hybrid? Have you written your book yet? Because you need to. And also, what would you say to our viewers or our listeners, anyone watching, if they are a parent, or if they suspect a child is being abused by, say, a partner or someone in the family? What would you say to that person listening, to that parent listening?
Oh, that's a big one. Okay, well, start off, you know, if you suspect something is going on, you need to talk to your child. If they're too young to talk to, one of the things I've learned through psychology is get them to draw you some pictures. Don't put shit into their head. They are fantastic at imagination. So don't put anything there. Ask straight up to just draw you a picture about, what's hurting them, or, there's just this. Then go and get them checked out by a GP. Make sure their little girls are intact. I don't know what you can do for a male. I'm sorry about that. You just got to get it checked out, all right? Then you have to take it from there. There are telltale signs. There's behavior. If your behavior, the child is young and the behaviors change drastically, or they start getting violent towards other siblings. There's a lot of areas. So you can't just jump to the conclusion that they're being interfered with, because there are so many other areas that could be going on. But you need to be very cautious. If you feel at any stage that they're in danger, you don't go out. You look after them. You make sure you're their parent and you take care of them, their needs. You listen to what they're saying. Jumping to conclusions is dangerous for everybody concerned. All right, I've seen it happen. And the other thing I like to say is, moving into the future, be honest. Be honest with yourself. Know what your limitations are. Try to push a little bit more past these limitations. We have a processing that goes on. When you get information, you might not understand it all at once. So you've got to file it away. It will come out when it needs to. Think about things like fight and flight. You don't need to do that anymore. You stay calm in all the situations that come up. You need to defend yourself. Your body has this amazing mechanism to want to survive. It will kick in if you need to protect yourself, okay? And if you don't, oh, well, I'm sorry, you're too far down the bloody concrete anyway. So there's so many areas that I could talk about, and it's just, I have to shut up now and then. I just say basically this is a growing adventure. This is, and it's not going to be an easy one. Once people wake up, we learn a certain amount of information about ourselves, and we go along with that for a little while, and then a bit more information comes out. So I could sit down with people and talk about, paranormal activity and aliens and craft, and they might not recall anything, and then they hear a keynote, boom, they're triggered, then they remember something, and something else shows up along the line. This applies to all areas of who we are. We are processing, information all the time. So I should stop there, honey.
That's okay, darling. So do you see yourself as a hybrid?
Yeah, I kind of do, actually. There's, with genetic manipulation, with the different experiences, experiments that have been done psychologically, different aliens, different beings being there, watching these experiences that I'm going through, not stepping in, I have to believe that there's more going on to this picture. I was born a month premature. I've had some weird things happen to my physicality. I've got 2 toenails on my little toes. I had slightly webbed fingers, webbed toes. I've got like knee pads on my toes, like where a knee would be. Yeah, there's a few others, and we'll just leave it at that. So I've got to keep some private things, eh?
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm from, and that's okay with me. Yeah. I'm here amongst all you other mental creatures.
And what about your book? Have you started writing it yet?
Yeah, look, I've got lots of starts. I've got so many different areas. It's just, oh, come on, mate. This is my book. Okay, I'm here. This is my book. I'm opening it up and I'm sharing it. If it turns up in paper form, well, that might be a mission accomplished.
Yeah.
This is it.
So how can people find you?
I pretty much type in Stone Hobbit. I'm on Twitter. a lot of the platforms. I've got a BitChute channel. I'm on YouTube. This is my first livey. Ta-da!
Oh,
So
I
yeah,
hadn't realised
breaking programming that's going on. So yeah, so this won't be the last. I plan on having like roundtable discussions about the heavy duty stuff, and it won't be for the light-hearted. Not everybody will like it, but it's not to trigger a negative response. It's to help us all heal, because whether we like it or not, there's been generations before myself and others that have come and have, you know, had programs and genetic manipulation, and we carry some of our ancestral connections. You know, I have telepathy, telepathic traits. And being telepathic is not just hearing voices and communicating with voices. There's a lot of other areas to the body that communicates. You can contact me via stonehobbit@gmail.com. And yes, just, you know, I'm on Skype, I'm on Zoom. Yeah,
And
I'm around.
what kind of services do you offer?
Basically regressions. When I say regressions, I'm not going to take you off planet and somewhere else. It's like, okay, you want to, the show that I do is called Transmutations. It's transmuting the negative experiences into a positive one, being able to identify where the trauma has come from, who it's come from, the baggage that's connected to it, and being able to return it back to the center, freeing yourself up. So you've purged, you've cleaned, you've identified this yourself. So it's just a frequency that I share, and then we go along with that. I make sure I give the tools. So once you've sat down and had a session with me, I give you the tools at the end of it. We'll go around a few times and just making sure you're comfortable. I give you the tools, you go away, then we can do it again if you want to. That is, it's energy exchange. It's about becoming aware that you can be better than what you are. We're all doing the same journey. There's no bet somebody's better than you or not. This is your personal journey, and I'm just here to point out, for, you know, I might have commonalities, I might have similar things that I experienced, similar scenarios that I've gone through. I see bigger patterns. I see it in politics. I see the patterns, that repetitive patterns. This is not just a one-off ride straight ahead. There's so many different levels to this rabbit hole. And yeah, I'm a navigator. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think you're a beautiful soul. I love your energy. I love how energetic you are. You're pulsating. You're pulsating. So I'll be delighted to have you back again, Stoney. And there is be delighted to have you back again. There's a couple of shows I'm not going to mention yet, but we talked about them earlier. So yeah, if you have any questions for Stoney, please let her know, and she can take a note of them and let me know, Stone. And I've really got into the habit of calling you Stoney. I'm sorry.
That's right.
But yeah, let me know, and we can go through them as well for the next time. So I can't think of anything I need to say. Oh yeah, I do have a Starseed Workshop coming up on the 27th and 28th of March. If any of our listeners would like to come and join me on that, you can check out my website, which is the Pleiadianchild.com, and drop me an email. I also do readings, and I do normal readings, and I also do Pleiadian channeling, direct voice channeling now, as I had an upgrade this year myself. So because before, when I was channeling them, they would be next to me, but during a live interview last year, they told me to close my eyes, so I did, and they stepped into me and they started using my voice, which was, to me, is just, it's beautiful. I'm so in awe of them, and so humbled to be able that they trust me enough to do that, you know. So so that's the service I offer now as well. please send me your links, Stone, and I will put them up on the video on the YouTube links as well, and the description. And I really look forward to talking to you again soon. And yeah, I'm going to go off to bed now. It's 4 a.m. here. It's 18th of February.
Goodness.
So
it's been absolutely wonderful, Soma. Thank you so much. And yes, I would definitely come back and we'll make more happen. So
yeah, that would be
thank you,
fantastic.
everybody, and be well. And I'll drop you those links later.
Okay, thanks, Stone.
When you wake up tomorrow.
Yes. Okay.
Right.
I'll see you later. Bye, Stone. Bye.